Imagine a high-security prison, right? The walls are massively thick. The watchtowers cast these long, intimidating shadows everywhere.
Yeah, just a totally terrifying setup.
Exactly. But here is the absolute craziest part. The doors to every single cell are completely unlocked.
Wait, unlocked?
Unlocked, wide open. The guards actually packed up and went home like a decade ago.
Okay, so the prisoners can just walk out whenever they want.
Yes. But every single prisoner remains seated quietly on their cot. They are absolutely terrified to even take one step out into the hallway.
Let me guess. It's because they think the guy in the next cell is a guard.
You nailed it. Every prisoner is convinced that the person right next door is a ruthless, uncompromising warden.
Oh, wow. That is just, that's the ultimate social trap right there.
It really is. It's a scenario where human beings become the fierce enforcers of a set of rules that literally no one in the building actually believes in anymore.
So the physical bars are totally gone.
Yeah, replaced entirely by psychological ones, just built entirely out of fake assumptions.
Which perfectly sets up what we are getting into today. Welcome to the deep dive, everyone.
We are dissecting this absolutely mind-blowing study published in the American Economic Review.
Right, done by researchers from the University of Chicago and the University of Zurich.
And look, the subject matter here goes way beyond just, academic theory.
Oh, absolutely. We are talking about how an entire demographic can remain locked out of the workforce, just totally frozen.
Frozen in a state of economic and cultural stagnation purely because of a phantom consensus.
And the best part is, we are going to look at the shockingly simple, incredibly low-cost intervention that basically shattered that stagnation overnight.
It is a total slap in the face to everything we assume about how culture changes. So let's set the scene.
The location for this research is Saudi Arabia, and the year is 2017.
Right. Let's establish the baseline reality of that exact time and place.
So in 2017, the female labor force participation rate in Saudi Arabia was, well, exceptionally low.
Like under 15% for women aged 15 and older.
Yeah, and if you drill down into the data to look at young married women working outside the home,
which, we should note, was a highly visible, highly scrutinized act within that society back then.
Exactly. The numbers there just drop off a complete cliff.
In the initial surveys conducted for this study, only 4% of the young, married Saudi men involved had wives who worked outside the home.
Just 4%. And when analysts or economists or even just casual observers looked at that 4% statistic, the assumption was totally unanimous.
The global narrative was that the culture was just deeply, unyieldingly traditional.
Right. People assumed the husbands were strictly opposed to female labor out of this deep-seated conservatism.
Like they were just putting their foot down and keeping their wives at home.
The prevailing theory was always that behavior perfectly reflects private belief.
But the reality that this research team uncovered completely shatters that assumption. It forces you to rethink everything.
Because the researchers managed to conduct these completely anonymous, highly secure, private surveys with these exact same young, married Saudi men.
We are talking about men aged 18 to 35.
The exact demographic universally presumed to be enforcing these strict domestic boundaries.
And the researchers asked them a really straightforward question in absolute privacy. They ask, in your opinion, should women be allowed to work outside the home?
And the results of that private survey show that 87% of those men said yes.
I need to pause on that. 87%.
Yeah. Nearly 9 out of 10 men privately endorsed the idea of women joining the outside workforce.
I find myself really struggling to reconcile those two statistics.
It's massive cognitive dissonance, right?
It's totally wild. You have a society where almost 90% of the men want this specific cultural shift to happen, but only how does an entire culture remain completely paralyzed when the overwhelming majority of his people are silently begging for change?
So sociologists actually have a label for this. They call it pluralistic ignorance.
Pluralistic ignorance. Okay, let's ditch the academic jargon. What does that actually mean for us?
To put it in relatable terms, it's basically a collective hallucination. Or a mirage of consensus.
I love that. A mirage of consensus.
It happens when a vast majority of individuals privately reject an old rule, or they privately support a new paradigm, but they publicly conform to the old standard anyway.
Out of a fear of social stigma, right?
Exactly. Out of a profound fear of being judged by the group.
Okay, so I want to make sure I'm Totally grasping the mechanics here. It sounds like a massive traffic jam where everyone thinks the person in front of them is driving slow on purpose.
That's a great way to look at it.
But in reality, everyone's foot is hovering over the gas pedal, just waiting for the brake lights ahead of them to turn off.
And nobody wants to be the one to honk the horn.
Yes. Nobody wants to be the jerk who honks.
That captures the dynamic perfectly. The fear of being the outlier totally dictates the behavior.
So an individual looks around their neighborhood and they see that 0 women are leaving the houses in the morning to go to work.
And their rational, albeit completely incorrect conclusion is to assume the neighbors passionately oppose the concept.
Because no one wants to risk social ostracization.
Right. No one wants to bring shame upon their family or damage their reputation within their community.
So the safest play is to just keep your progressive beliefs a closely guarded secret.
You keep it secret, and you strictly enforce the conservative norm within your own household just to blend in.
So you basically end up with a society entirely composed of actors.
Precisely. Everyone is performing a role they actually despise for an audience that doesn't even exist.
It's like the emperor's new clothes, but instead of everyone pretending to see a fancy suit, everyone is pretending to be a prison guard.
That is exactly it. It creates what the sociologist Timur Kuran famously termed preference falsification.
Preference falsification. Okay, meaning you wear a fake mask.
Yeah, people construct a public persona that directly contradicts their private desires. And the real tragedy of this fake mask effect is that it's self-sustaining.
Oh.
Because the more you fake your preference, the more you convince the person next to you that the conservative norm is alive and well.
Which then forces them to fake their preference even harder.
Exactly. It just spirals. And we have actually seen this architectural blueprint for invisible prisons in other eras.
Right. History has countless examples of this.
Consider the waning decades of the Soviet Union. Millions of citizens privately recognized the economic and moral bankruptcy of the regime.
But because the state relied on informants, the perceived risk of speaking out was catastrophic.
So everyone stood in the squares and publicly applauded the regime, manufacturing the illusion of unanimous support.
Or you can look at the American South during the era of racial segregation.
Yeah, polling data from the late 1960s showed that white Americans consistently overestimated the degree of support for segregation among other white Americans.
Okay, but that brings up a critical logistical question regarding this specific Saudi Arabian study.
What's that?
It's one thing to misread the political temperature of a massive, sprawling nation like the Soviet Union.
Right.
But the researchers here are claiming that 87% of these men supported women working. That is an overwhelming supermajority.
It is huge.
If almost everyone in the country thinks the exact same way, how could they possibly maintain the illusion that they were a tiny minority?
You'd think someone would slip up, right?
Exactly. Surely the truth leaks out when it's 87% of the population.
Well, to prove that this blind spot was real and not just some statistical glitch, the research team designed an exceptionally rigorous sociological experiment.
I read the methodology section on this, and the setup is just incredible.
They recruited 500 married Saudi men living in Riyadh, and they brought these participants into a hotel conference center in discrete groups of 30.
And the recruitment strategy is the detail that completely blew my mind. They did not pull a random assortment of strangers from all over the city.
No, not at all.
They systematically recruited these groups of 30 men from the exact same residential neighborhoods.
These participants actually shared the same social circles.
Right. The data revealed that the average participant personally knew 15 of the 29 other men sitting in the room with them.
And that specific parameter elevates the stakes of the experiment immensely.
Oh, massively.
Our basic intuition about human relationships tells us that people who live on the same street, who pray at the same mosque, who get coffee together,
they should have a reasonably accurate read on the fundamental values of their friends, right?
You certainly think so.
Which means the researchers had a monumental hurdle to clear here.
Oh, a huge hurdle.
Because think about it.
Yeah.
If I am sitting in a room with 15 guys I drink coffee with every single week,
yeah,
and you ask me to confess a belief that I think is highly stigmatized in our group, I am going to lie.
Absolutely. You lie to protect your reputation.
Right. I will lie unless you can convince me with absolute certainty that my neighbors will never, ever know what I said. The paranoia would be off the charts.
The research team totally understood that. So they engineered an environment of extreme, almost clinical privacy.
They made it like a double-blind safe house.
Exactly. They arranged the 30 chairs in the room so that every alternating chair faced the opposite direction.
Meaning it was physically impossible for any participant to glance at another guy's screen.
Completely impossible. The surveys were conducted on smartphones, and more importantly, they established a strict double-blind data collection protocol.
So no names attached.
No names, no complete phone numbers, no addresses. All identifying info was permanently severed from the actual survey responses.
They only kept like the last 3 digits of the phone numbers just to track the data points, right?
Exactly, completely anonymizing the individuals.
They essentially built a digital confessional booth that guaranteed zero social blowback.
Once the participants finally felt safe, the researchers asked them 2 distinct questions.
The first one was to establish that baseline we mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Do you privately support women working outside the home?
And that is where that 87% approval rating comes from. They felt safe enough to tell the truth.
But the second question is where they set the trap.
It is brilliant. The researchers told each participant, look around this room. You know these men. Guess how many of the other 29 guys sitting here answered yes to that exact same question.
And to make sure the guys didn't just click randomly to finish the survey, they actually incentivized the guess.
Yeah, they offered a financial reward to the individual who guessed the most accurately.
They wanted these men to really think critically and apply everything they knew about their own community.
And the results of those guesses represent just a total catastrophic collapse of social awareness.
It's wild. Nearly 3/4 of the men significantly underestimated the progressiveness of their peers.
Almost 75%.
You have a room where almost 9 out of 10 guys are silently endorsing the idea, and the vast majority of them look around at their actual friends and guess that the room is dominated by strict conservatives.
The quantifiable magnitude of that error is just astounding. On average, the participants underestimated the true level of support by 24 percentage points.
24 points.
Yeah.
I mean, we are wired to assume human opinion falls on a normal distribution.
Like a bell curve.
Right. If you ask a room full of people to guess the weight of a cow, you generally get a beautiful bell curve centered reasonably close to the actual weight. The wisdom of crowds.
But the distribution of the data here inverted that entirely. The crowd actually generated an anti-truth.
Yeah, if you look at the slide data the researchers put together, if you plot their guesses on a graph where 0 represents perfect accuracy.
The data absolutely does not form a neat bell curve around 0.
Not at all. The vast majority of the plot points cluster deep, deep into the negative territory.
It is a severe left-skewed distribution of fundamental misunderstanding. Most of these men genuinely believed they were the lonely, isolated, progressive minority.
The human tragedy woven into those numbers is just profound.
It really is. Picture the internal monologue of a participant sitting in that room.
Okay, let's walk through it.
He wants his wife to pursue her career ambitions. He sees the economic and personal benefits for his family.
Right.
But he looks across the aisle at his neighbor, let's call him Ahmed, and he thinks, I cannot cross this line. Ahmed is a traditionalist. He will judge my family. My social standing will evaporate.
Meanwhile, Ahmed is sitting 5 feet away, harboring the exact same ambitions for his own household.
Exactly. And Ahmed is paralyzed by the exact same fear of judgment from the first man.
I am looking at this dynamic, and I find myself really pushing back on the logistics of it again.
How so?
Well, if these men are neighbors, if they have known each other for years, they have to converse.
Right. You'd think.
They spend hours together in social settings. How is it physically possible to maintain a 24 percentage point delusion about your closest friends for years on end?
Do they just sit in silence when they hang out?
Yeah. Do they just stare at the wall?
Well, you are assuming that proximity guarantees meaningful communication.
Doesn't.
Actually, no. When the researchers later conducted a broader national survey to dig into the communication habits of Saudi men, they discovered a complete conversational vacuum regarding this specific topic.
A vacuum? Okay, what did they ask them?
They asked a simple, direct question. How often do you discuss the topic of women working outside the home with your male friends and relatives?
And the data on that question is literally the skeleton key to this whole phenomena.
It is. 59% of the respondents admitted they rarely or never discuss the topic with other men.
59%.
Right.
And nearly 40% chose the most extreme option, stating they very rarely or never bring it up.
The subject is entirely walled off from their social interactions.
This is where we see that spiral of silence theory, transitioning from a textbook concept into measurable mathematical reality.
Oh, absolutely. The data revealed a perfectly smooth, monotonic relationship between a man's communication frequency and his level of cognitive bias.
Meaning, the less a man talked about the subject, the more completely detached from reality his assumptions were.
The numbers back that up with shocking clarity. The group of men who reported that they never discussed the topic with their peers guessed that overall societal support was hovering around 44%.
Wow. So they were operating with a 40 percentage point deficit from reality.
Massive blind spot. Conversely, the small fraction of men who reported they frequently discussed it with their friends, they guessed that societal support was around 79%.
Which is incredibly close to the actual 87% reality.
Their bias shrank to almost nothing just because they talked about it.
The spiral of silence dictates that fear of isolation drives self-censorship.
Because the men perceive the topic as sensitive or potentially stigmatizing, they simply omit it from their conversations entirely.
They will debate sports, politics, economics, whatever, but the domestic sphere is treated as radioactive.
And because they never actually probe the opinions of their peers, the oldest, most visible, most conservative norm wins by default.
Silence is not a neutral state.
No, it's not.
Silence actively manufactures fake realities. The lack of open dialogue acts as the primary engine for societal stagnation.
Now think about the implications of that mechanism in our modern digital age.
Oh man, with social media.
Exactly. We assume platforms that allow constant broadcasting of opinions would shatter the spiral of silence.
Because everyone is always talking.
Right. But if individuals only curate and broadcast the socially safe opinions to avoid algorithmic or mob backlash, the spiral simply digitizes and accelerates.
Wow. You log onto your feed, you see a wall of expected conformist opinions, and you bury your true, nuanced beliefs even deeper.
We all become our own prison guards online.
That is deeply unsettling. But I want to jump back to the study and challenge the foundational premise of this 87% support number.
Okay, bring on the skepticism.
If I am a skeptic reading this paper, my immediate instinct is to invoke social desirability bias.
Sure. People lying to look good.
Exactly. These men are sitting in a nice hotel conference room taking a survey administered by researchers from the University of Chicago and the University of Zurich.
Very prestigious Western academics.
Right. So is it not highly probable that a large chunk of that 87% is just guys lying? They want to sound modern, cosmopolitan, and progressive for the researchers analyzing the data.
It is the most vital scientific critique you could possibly level at the study.
Because if the underlying support is a mirage born of politeness, the entire premise collapses.
And the research team anticipated this exact skepticism. They knew they had to prove it.
How do you prove someone isn't just saying what you want to hear?
To prove the support was genuine, they deployed an ingenious methodological tool known as a list experiment.
Okay, I need you to explain the mechanics of a list experiment because the math behind it is genuinely elegant, but it sounds like a magic trick.
It kind of is. How do you definitively prove someone is holding a specific belief without ever actually asking them to admit to that belief?
That sounds impossible.
You provide the participant with absolute, bulletproof, plausible deniability.
Okay, how?
You take the sensitive, highly stigmatized statement and you camouflage it within a cluster of completely mundane statements.
Like hiding a needle in a haystack of boring opinions.
Exactly. The researchers took a large, separate national sample of roughly 1,500 married Saudi men and divided them into two cohorts.
Okay, a control group and a treatment group.
Right. The control group was presented with a list of 3 relatively boring, non-sensitive policy statements.
Give me an example of what they used.
For example, Saudi nationals should receive priority for jobs over expatriates, or the national minimum wage should remain at 3,000 rials.
Okay, so statements that people might genuinely disagree on, but holding either opinion carries zero social stigma.
Precisely. No one is getting canceled over their minimum wage opinion.
Got it.
The researchers then instructed the control group. Do not tell us which specific statements you agree with. We do not want to know your individual stances.
Wait, then what do they want to know?
They say, simply count how many of the 3 statements you agree with in total and give us that single number. 0, 1, 2, or 3.
Oh, wow. So you are completely protected. If you answer 2, the researchers have absolutely no idea which 2 you picked.
Exactly. Complete anonymity. Then, the researchers turned to the treatment group.
Okay, what did they do differently?
They present this group with the exact same 3 boring statements, but they secretly embed a 4th, highly sensitive statement into the list.
It's a real question.
Right. The 4th statement is, women should be allowed to work outside the home.
Sneaky.
And the instructions remain exactly the same. Tell us the total number of statements you agree with from 0 to 4.
So even if a guy agrees with the 4th statement, he just bumps his total number up by 1. He never explicitly says, I support women working.
Exactly. The magic happens in the aggregate statistics.
Walks me through the math.
Because the researchers know the average number of agreements generated by the control group on the 3-item list, they simply subtract that baseline average from the average number of agreements generated by the treatment group on the 4-item list.
Oh. The mathematical difference between those 2 averages has to represent the true hidden level of support for the 4th statement.
Yes. No single human being ever had to confess to supporting women working. The pressure to lie to impress the researchers is entirely neutralized.
That is a masterful application of statistical deduction to completely bypass human psychology.
It really is a lie detector without wires. And when the researchers ran the numbers on this list experiment, the hidden support rate calculated from the data was 80%.
80%, wow.
It aligned almost perfectly with the direct survey data. The social desirability bias was statistically insignificant.
So the overwhelming support for women entering the workforce was undeniably real. 0% fake.
It was absolute reality. But the researchers did not stop there. They wanted to understand the temporal scope of this pluralistic ignorance.
Meaning, how long had everyone been faking it?
Exactly. They pulled historical polling data from the Air Barometer, an independent research network dating back to 2010 and 2011.
Okay, looking back almost a decade.
They looked specifically at the responses from young Saudi men regarding female labor from 10 years prior.
And what were the numbers back then?
The numbers from a decade prior were hovering at 77% support.
77%, 10 years ago.
This completely rewrites the narrative of social change in the region.
It really does. This high level of progressive thought was not some sudden trendy awakening triggered by the proliferation of smartphones or recent top-down governmental decrees.
No, this was a silent tsunami that had been trapped just beneath the surface of the culture for over 10 years.
Just think about the devastating economic and human cost of that specific decade.
It's heartbreaking. 10 years of suppressed economic output.
10 years where millions of women could have been launching careers, innovating within industries, and contributing to the financial stability of their households.
And all of that potential was just frozen in amber. Not by a legal mandate and not by actual ideological opposition, but purely by an information bottleneck.
You literally have millions of people desperately wanting to alter the fabric of their daily lives. But society remains paralyzed exclusively because no one possesses the mechanism to aggregate the truth.
Right. So the ultimate question becomes, how do you fix it?
Well, if their minds are already changed, you don't need to run a 20-year public awareness campaign about gender equality.
Exactly. You simply need to show them the mirror.
And that transition from theory to behavioral intervention is where the study becomes totally groundbreaking.
This is where we get the slap in the face data. The researchers took those 500 men in the Riyadh hotel conference rooms, and immediately after the men had submitted their wildly inaccurate guesses about their peers,
Right. The moment they locked in their guess that everyone else was conservative.
the researchers split the room into a control group and a treatment group.
The control group was allowed to remain in the dark, trapped in their incorrect assumptions.
Business as usual for them. But for the treatment group, the researchers introduced the cheapest, simplest intervention imaginable.
What did they do?
They just flashed a single chart onto the participants' smartphone screens.
One chart.
One chart. It revealed the actual raw data gathered from the men sitting in that specific room just moments prior.
It essentially said, you guessed that your neighbors were conservative. In reality, 87% of the men sitting around you right now support women working outside the home.
Just boom, reality check. There was no moralizing lecture attached to the chart, no academic attempting to persuade them to be better husbands or more progressive citizens.
Just the localized, undeniable data.
But as we know, data alone is purely academic until it intersects with real-world friction.
Right. Knowing is half the battle, but doing is another thing entirely.
The researchers needed to test if this sudden revelation of truth would actually alter deeply entrenched behavior.
So they presented the men with an immediate, high-stakes choice.
At the conclusion of the session, the researchers said, "Thank you for participating. You now have two options.
Option A.
You can take a $5 Amazon gift card and leave.
Okay, safe, easy cash. What was option B?
Or you can forfeit the cash, and in exchange, we will sign your wife up for a premium, real-world job matching platform that is specifically designed to connect Saudi women with employers looking for outside-the-home labor."
Oh, wow. The friction here is critical to understand.
Very critical.
Because signing your wife up for this platform is not a meaningless gesture. It's an action with profound, visible, real-world consequences.
If the platform works and she secures an interview or a job, she will literally be leaving the house.
The neighbors will see her. The theoretical traditionalists in the community will take notice. The social risk becomes very tangible.
So they're weighing $5 against potential social exile.
The results of that single choice perfectly isolate the power of the invisible prison.
In the control group, the men who still believe their neighbors would ostracize them, only 23.5% opted to sign up for the job platform.
So the vast majority decided to play it safe and take the $5.
But look at the treatment group.
The men who spent 5 seconds looking at a chart proving they were in the majority.
Their sign-up rate for the job platform surged to 32%.
That represents a 36.4% increase in progressive behavior, generated entirely by a momentary exposure to accurate information.
It's wild, and the researchers dug even deeper into the cross-sections of that data, and the nuances are just fascinating.
They isolated the specific subset of men who had previously underestimated their peers.
Yeah, the guys who harbored the most severe cognitive bias about their community's conservatism.
The ones who thought they were totally alone.
When that specific group saw the chart, the shock to their system was monumental.
It must have been a huge relief.
Their sign-up rates for the platform exploded by 57%.
57% jump. It serves as a profound demonstration of how quickly fear can evaporate.
These men realized in a fraction of a second that empowering their wives was not a path to social exile. It was, in fact, the mainstream position of their own tribe.
The invisible shackles just dissolved.
Instantly.
Now, I am looking at these sign-up numbers for the app, and I have to admit, my innate skepticism is flaring up again.
Lay it on me.
Sure, they clicked the button on a smartphone in the safety of a hotel conference room while riding the emotional high of a new revelation.
It's easy to be brave in a hotel room.
Exactly. But when they leave that hotel, drive back to their actual neighborhoods, and the reality of daily life sets in, doesn't that momentary bravery evaporate?
People download apps all the time and never open them.
I have like 20 fitness apps on my phone right now. Did this 5-second intervention actually translate into women entering the workforce?
The research team shared that exact same skepticism. They knew that performative clicks in a lab setting do not equal actual sociological change.
So what did they do?
They initiated what is arguably the most vital phase of the entire experiment, the long-term tracking.
The golden tracking phase.
3 to 5 months after the hotel sessions, the researchers began calling the families to measure actual real-world outcomes.
The administrative data from those follow-up calls is just staggering.
They looked at the wives of the men in the control group first, the ones who never saw the chart.
And what were they doing?
Over the ensuing months, about 5.8% of those women had actually applied for a job outside the home.
Okay, pretty low. Now compare that to the wives of the men in the treatment group.
Their application rate was 16.2%. It nearly tripled.
Tripled. But applying for a job could still be seen as a somewhat invisible low-risk action. You are just emailing a resume from your living room.
True. So the researchers tracked physical job interviews as well.
Where you actually have to leave the house.
Exactly. In the control group, a mere 1% of the wives had stepped out of the house to attend a job interview.
1%. And in the informed group?
The interview rate surged to nearly 6%.
We are talking about an over 400% increase in women physically entering the public sphere to secure employment.
A single 5-second exposure to a localized bar chart permanently altered the economic trajectory of those households months down the line.
It's hard to overstate how crazy that is.
And the revelation of that data triggered a cascading effect across other areas of social friction, too.
The spillover effect.
Right. During the follow-up calls, the researchers posed a seemingly unrelated question. Saudi Arabia had recently lifted the decades-old ban on women driving.
Which was huge news globally.
Right. So the researchers asked the husbands, would you be willing to sign your wife up for driving lessons?
Now, learning to drive is an entirely different behavioral matrix.
It's highly visible.
Highly visible, historically hyper-stigmatized. and completely divorced from the labor market platform they were offered in the hotel.
Yet the intervention's impact spilled over beautifully.
What were the numbers?
In the control group, roughly 65% of the men expressed willingness to sign their wives up for driving lessons.
But among the men who had seen the chart regarding employment support months prior,
Their willingness to support driving lessons jumped to over 76%.
it is a profound domino effect.
Once you prove that the foundational perception of societal judgment is a fraud in one arena, the participants begin to question the validity of the stigma in every other arena.
You fix the illusions surrounding the labor market, and you inadvertently unlock mobility, agency, and freedom across the entire spectrum of daily life.
Now, a skeptical economist reviewing this data might propose a confounding variable here.
Let's hear it.
They might argue that the chart did not actually remove social stigma. Rather, it altered the men's calculation of labor demand.
Meaning they think the job market changed.
Yeah, the theory would be, the men see the chart, realize everyone supports women working, and deduce that local corporations must be actively expanding their hiring of women right now.
So they encourage their wives to apply, not because they feel socially safe, but just because they think the economic odds of getting hired just went way up.
It's a very logical alternative theory. It reduces the motivation from a complex sociological awakening to a simple calculation of return on investment.
Okay. Did the researchers account for that?
They absolutely controlled for that exact hypothesis. During the study, they surveyed the men on their explicit expectations regarding the labor market.
What did they have?
They asked them to estimate the percentage of local companies that had established the required semi-segregated work environments to hire women.
Basically asking, do you think companies are hiring right now?
And the data proved conclusively that the informational intervention had absolutely zero impact on their perception of corporate demand. Furthermore, even among the few men whose perception of the market did fluctuate slightly, those fluctuations had zero statistical correlation with their decision to sign up for the job app.
So the economic calculation had absolutely nothing to do with it.
Nothing at all. The sole catalyst for the explosion in female employment activity was the removal of peer-driven social stigma.
It proves how incredibly malleable human behavior can be once the threat of tribal rejection is neutralized.
It really does. But, as fascinating as it is to see the husbands liberated from their false assumptions, focusing entirely on the men only addresses half the equation.
That's a great point.
What happens if you take this exact same sociological secret weapon, this undeniable proof that the prison guards do not exist, and you bypass the husbands entirely?
What happens when you hand that data directly to the women who are actually seeking employment?
To test that, the researchers shifted their focus from the husband's permissions to the women's agency.
They ran a totally different experiment, right?
Yeah, they partnered with a massive Saudi hiring company to execute a real-world natural experiment within the actual labor market.
The setup for this phase is just brilliant. The hiring company had a pool of 291 women who had recently applied for jobs.
And these women were specifically seeking work-from-home positions, conducting phone surveys.
The baseline job offered a salary of 200 reals per day.
It was standard, economically safe, and entirely invisible to the outside world.
Meaning it carried zero social friction. You just sit in your living room making phone calls.
Right, so the hiring company contacted these applicants and presented them with an alternative offer.
They said, you can keep the remote phone job for 200 reals. Or you can take a different position doing the exact same type of survey work.
However, the second position requires you to travel to a local shopping mall and conduct the interviews face-to-face with the public.
Now, we really need to contextualize the layout and atmosphere of a Saudi mall in 2017 to understand the weight of this choice.
Please do.
A shopping mall is the epicenter of public visibility there. For a woman to stand in the corridors with a clipboard, actively approaching strangers to conduct interviews, she is maximizing her exposure to society.
She is inviting the gaze and potential judgment of the exact traditionalist forces everyone fears.
To compensate for that immense social friction, the hiring company attached a financial premium to the mall job.
Yeah, they offered 240 reals per day plus full reimbursement for transportation costs.
It was a 20% wage increase.
Objectively, it was a far superior economic opportunity, provided the applicant could tolerate the perceived social cost.
The researchers split the female applicants into two groups. The control group simply received the choice between the two jobs, with no additional context.
Just, do you want job A or job B?
Right. How did the baseline social pressure hold up against a 20% wage premium?
The social stigma won decisively.
By how much?
Only 18% of the women in the control group accepted the mall job.
Wow. The overwhelming majority looked at the extra money, weighed it against the terrifying prospect of public visibility, and chose to stay home.
18%. But then we look at the treatment group.
What was the intervention this time?
The hiring company calls them, makes the exact same dual offer, but right before asking the woman to make her final decision, the representative casually drops one specific sentence of context into the conversation.
What's the sentence?
They say, by the way, did you know that in a recent national survey, 82% of young married Saudi men privately expressed support for women working outside the home?
One single sentence of aggregated truth.
The impact of that sentence is where this deep dive becomes truly astonishing.
The moment those women heard that statistic, their willingness to accept the visible, outside-the-home mall job skyrocketed to 33.3%.
That is an 85% increase in the acceptance rate for the highly stigmatized role.
Just from hearing one sentence about what men actually think.
And once again, the researchers relied on hard administrative data, not just verbal commitments over the phone.
Right, who actually showed up for work.
They tracked who physically showed up at the shopping mall on their start date to do the work.
Yeah.
The physical show-up rates for the women who heard that one sentence jumped by 74% compared to the control group.
I am trying to visualize the psychological shift that occurs in that moment on the phone.
It must be incredible.
It is like standing at the edge of a frozen lake that you really need to cross. You have been told your entire life that the ice is paper thin and will shatter the moment you step on it.
So you are terrified to move.
Right. Then someone drills a core sample right in front of you and shows you that the ice is actually 3 feet thick solid steel.
You don't just tentatively step onto it.
No, you sprint across.
Sociologists refer to this as female elasticity in the face of social norms.
Female elasticity.
When these women were handed empirical proof that the terrifying wall of patriarchal opposition they felt looming behind them was largely constructed of paper, their courage to push boundaries expanded exponentially.
It provided them with the ultimate leverage.
Exactly. They were no longer reliant on hoping their individual husbands would graciously grant them permission.
They possessed the raw data to negotiate with their families and with society at large.
They could point to the truth and basically say, society is actually fine with this. We are sacrificing our economic security and my personal potential to appease a ghost.
Pulling back to view the broader implications of this study, it serves as a profound indictment of how the operational logic of the world is constantly warped by group silence.
In societies or communities that lack natural, transparent mechanisms for aggregating truth, whether that is open democratic debate, reliable public polling, or simply a culture of candid conversation, pluralistic ignorance thrives totally unchecked.
The preference falsification calcifies. It just hardens.
It locks away the intellectual and economic potential of millions of people, stalling the engine of an entire nation purely through a misunderstanding.
But the incredibly hopeful takeaway from this research is the solution it provides.
It's so optimistic.
When you manage to pierce that heavy veil of silence with raw, undeniable data, society does not just inch forward.
No, it evolves at lightning speed. Decades of economic stagnation and suppressed ambition were shattered by a 5-second glance at a bar chart.
The cost of the intervention was practically zero, but the yield was immeasurable.
It proves that you do not always need to embark on a massive generational campaign to change hearts and minds.
Because in many cases, the hearts and minds are already exactly where they need to be.
You simply have to introduce people to the consensus they already share.
I want you, the listener, to internalize the mechanics of this phenomenon and apply it to your own environment.
Look closely at your workplace culture, the dynamics within your extended family, or the unwritten rules of your specific community.
What rigid, seemingly unbreakable norms are you quietly conforming to every single day, simply because you assume everyone around you fiercely defends them?
What crucial conversations are you actively avoiding right now out of a paralyzing fear of a social stigma that might be entirely fabricated?
The Middle East is undergoing rapid, highly visible cultural shifts right now, and the revelation of hidden data like this is a fundamental driver of that evolution.
But the question you really need to mull over when you take your headphones off is this.
What heavy, terrifying social norm in your own world is actually just waiting for one person to turn the lights on?
Take a hard, critical look at the consensus you are bowing to.
You might just find that the prison doors have been unlocked the entire time, and the monster keeping you inside is nothing but a mirage.